Okay, welcome back, everybody. Let's move on to the next course. Remember, we're doing three courses today. The next one is leverage ordered data. I'll grab the link, put that in there, and I've also got my usual message. Usually, if we've had a longer break, occasionally the audio video doesn't quite work. So it's important to tell everyone to refresh their browser if they can't hear me. So there's two lessons in this course. We're going to be taking a look at extracting value from ordered data using adjacent feature attributes. We'll look at it as a concept, and then in the next lesson, you'll actually do some hands-on exercises with it. So when we talk about ordered data, we're talking about a situation like what we have here. Here we can see we have X and Y coordinates. The X and Y coordinate that we're provided is not the actual X and Y coordinate of that particular feature. It is the difference in X and Y. So in order to actually make use of the feature, you have to know what the previous feature's coordinates were. So in this situation, the attribute value for a particular feature is directly affected by the attribute values of either preceding or following features. So we're dealing with offsets here instead of absolute values. Now, in order to make use of attribute values in adjacent features, you have to use one of two transformers. There's only two transformers which actually support this functionality. Those are the attribute manager and the attribute creator. Which one you use is just up to personal preference. I find that if I'm dealing with a data set that has a large number of attributes, I tend to use the attribute creator because then my view is just of the attribute that I'm creating. I don't have to scroll all the way down to the bottom of a long list of attributes like I would in the attribute manager. But if I'm going to be doing other attribute management tasks, perhaps renaming attributes, removing attributes, things like that, then I'll use the attribute manager. In order to turn on this functionality in the parameters for the transformer, there's this enable adjacent features, uh, enable adjacent feature attributes parameter. So you turn that on, and then you can tell it how many prior features do you want to consider and how many subsequent features do you want to consider. And then to make use of it, when you go into the text editor for a particular, well, text editor or the expression editor for a new attribute, you will see this additional option here. So you have the attributes for this feature, and then you have feature -1. This would be the prior feature. And then you can directly access the attributes there. So in this situation here, we have an issue date, and then we have the previous feature with its issue date. So we can do a date time difference, the date time of the current feature, and then compare that to the date time of the previous feature. So something to consider is what do you do, especially in this case here, when you're dealing with a previous feature, what's the previous feature for the very first feature that's being read in. That feature has no previous feature. So there's a few ways that that can be handled. So here's the missing value option. So we can either do no substitution. Keep in mind that there are certain functions, certain mathematical evaluations where you have to have a value. If you do no substitution, then basically it's null. If we're concatenating things together, that won't be a problem. If you're doing a mathematical calculation, a null will cause the mathematical calculation to fail, and you'll end up with a failed translation, and that would be bad. So we could either provide it with a default value. If you're dealing with offsets, then often setting it to 0. The first feature has no offsets. It's just the actual value. So setting that to a default value will work. Otherwise, you could choose the closest adjacent feature. So if you're selecting multiple features, just select what is available and go from there. So that's a quick overview of ordered data. And in the next lesson, we'll work through an exercise. And we'll see how things can get a little bit complicated if you're not very careful in the Attribute Manager. So please review the lesson, and we'll continue at 11:22. Good luck, everybody.